We warmly welcome you to our competitive paper presentation, Translating Management Practices Across Cultures, the Role of Boundary Spanners, Social Capital. We are Madeleine Bausch, Sina Grosskopf, and Christoph Barmeyer from the University of Passau, Chair of Intercultural Communication from the southeast of Germany at the Austrian border. So, Christoph, tell us, what's the whole paper about? What's the situation and what's the complication?
The situation is that MNCs transfer management practices across borders. In recent years, the concept of translation in the diffusion of management practices has become a major topic. However, different from its literal meaning, translation is understood as a metaphor in order to describe the transformation and movement of organizational practices across contexts. That involves their transformation and adaptation in the receiving context. On the one hand, literature tells us that boundary spanners are useful mediators and translators in knowledge transfer. On the other hand, we know that social capital is also helpful in the translation of knowledge. It leads to improved cohesiveness in organizations. Nevertheless, little is actually known about boundary spanner social capital and its role in the translation of management practices across cultures. Therefore, we question ourselves what role the social capital of boundary spanners plays in translating management practices from Germany to Brazil.
And Sina, tell us, which concepts do we draw on?
Okay, so to answer the research questions, we draw on two concepts, social capital and boundary spanning. We rely on Napier and Goschel's dimensions of social capital. Social capital refers to resources embedded within networks possessed by an individual. Following this definition, social capital comprises both the network and the assets that are mobilized by that network. Napier and Goschel divide social capital into three dimensions. The structural dimension constitutes the quantity of networks, so who knows whom. The cognitive dimension develops through shared language and narratives. What knowledge does the individual have? And the relational dimension represents the quality of the networks. So it contains mutual trust through personal relationships. How does the individual create and maintain the network? Moreover, boundary spanners are individuals who dispose of an extensive quantitative and qualitative social network, and thus expanded social capital. They can become mediators at interfaces, bridging borders. They contribute to the facilitation of knowledge exchange, and they are the key individuals who translate and mediate knowledge from one entity to another. Overall, we take on the perspective of Scandinavian institutionalism to research the role of social capital. Scandinavian institutionalism has a sincere interest in the individual micro level and asks how actors actively create and influence institutions. Meaning and sense-making are at the heart of Scandinavian institutionalism. And Madeleine, tell us, how did we conduct the research?
We conducted the research based on two qualitative case studies of German multinational companies in Brazil. In general, we position ourselves in an interpretive paradigm. We draw on data from 51 expert interviews, 7 focus groups, and we conducted ethnographic research on the production sites in Germany and Brazil. We then analyzed our data with the computer program MaxQDA, and we applied a deductive and inductive research logic, so extending the framework by Napier and Goschel by further facets. Overall, we could identify 11 boundary spanners who were central translators of the management practices.
And Madeleine, what about the findings?
In our study, we detected the crucial role that culture plays in the use of boundary spanner social capital in cross-cultural practice transfer. That means that the intercultural context has an influence on the social capital the boundary spanners use for translating the practices meaningfully into a new context, which in our case was Brazil. So we could see that all three dimensions of Napier and Gauchel also apply to our context. However, we identified 6 more facets to be relevant in the cross-border transfer to Brazil. All the new facets we added, you can see marked in green here. We detected 3 new facets in the cognitive dimension, 2 in the relational dimension, and 1 in the structural dimension. You can see that the cognitive and the relational dimension seem to be of higher importance in our context, as we detected the most new facets in these dimensions. Well, we would like to present to you all the facets. However, we're going to explain what's the matter with the personal orientation. Please check our paper for a detailed description of all the other facets. So, personal orientation manifested through the willingness of the boundary spanners to spend time during work and in their spare time with the local workforce and with their local colleagues. So the personal orientation became apparent through the frequency the term proximidade, closeness, was used. So the politeness served to establish the harmony among the conversation partners. And in the end, the personal orientation helped the boundary spanners to establish a personal relationship with the Brazilian workforce for exchanging knowledge. Moreover, it fostered trust and motivation to make one understand on the one side, but also to listen to the others on the other side.
Okay, I understand. But what's the meaning of it all, Madeleine?
Well, in general, it means that the different facets of social capital have an impact on the translation quality and the translation behavior. Our findings indicate that the dimensions of social capital play different roles in the translation of practices, and there is a general hierarchy of social capital that applies probably to all cultural contexts. So, first of all, the structural dimension is a necessary condition. But as well, the cognitive dimension is indispensable. That means that only the shared language, so not just in terms of a verbal language, but combined with intercultural communication skills and culture-specific knowledge, led to meaningful translation process between the original and the target context. So, however, in the Brazilian context, we found the relational dimension to be of great importance. This might be due to Brazilian culture's strong personal orientation, to its harmony maintenance, the importance of group cohesion, and of the networks which are constantly used to solve problems and to overcome bureaucratic structures, a term that in Brazil is called jeitinho brasileiro. As well, our findings indicate that they are probably highly context-specific. So the added facets probably reflect a Brazilian hierarchy of dimensions. So the relational social capital served as a basic condition to gain structural access to information, but as well, we could see that the cognitive dimension via culture-specific knowledge served as a door opener to the relational and the structural dimension. So that means that as we conducted our case study in Brazil, we assume that the importance of the relational dimension might depend on the cultural context.
Great. So Christoph, what's the contribution of our paper?
Our study contributes to literature by expanding the dimensions of social capital with intercultural facets. As well, we highlight the relevance of culture-specific social capital, as we did with regard to Brazil. Concerning methods, we contribute to literature by qualitative case studies in the Brazilian cultural context. That means regarding a developing country.
Thank you so much, Christoph. That's very interesting. But Madeleine, didn't we face any challenges, limitations that would serve for future research?
Of course, there are, Sina. I will mention 3 of them. So during our research, we saw that the facets of social capital partially overlapped and they were mutually dependent. So it would be great to investigate the dynamics and the connection between the dimensions. Moreover, we conducted our study in the Brazilian context. So it would be interesting to see if our newly added facets also apply to other contexts and cultures. Finally, we base our definition on Nahabier and Gauchel. So we are aware that there are different definitions that could be considered in future research, compared and combined and aggregated to a higher cross-discipline understanding of social capital.
Thank you so much for these insights. If our presentation made you curious about the cultural peculiarities of Brazil, we invite you to have a closer look on our paper. Thank you so much.